Rusty? We can hear you. We're just waiting for Rusty here. All right. I want to go ahead and welcome everyone to this event, our Lightning Friday event, Bolt12 for podcasters and content creators here. My setup is not working with me very well here, but it looks like we have everyone. I just want to get Rusty up here, and we'll be ready to start. While he kind of gets his thing situated here, I'll just introduce everyone and get us all started here. So I'm Chaz. I'm the host of the Lightning Junkies podcast. We have our regular host, Christopher, and Evan Kaludis. And we have some special guests here today. We have Stephan Livera, known for his podcast, obviously. And we have Rusty Russell, who is the brainchild behind Offers/Bolt12. So great. We have Rusty on stage, and it looks like we lost Evan. But how are you guys all doing today?
Good. Sorry, it's obscene o'clock here, so I'm just drinking a coffee while I'm warming up.
That's perfectly okay.
Doing well. It's 3 o'clock for me, so timing is good. No coffee required, but I know Rusty, he recently got that new coffee machine, so hopefully that's working out well.
It's definitely a lifesaver.
What is it, espresso, or what do you like to whip up, Rusty?
Oh yeah, no. This is a quality Italian espresso machine. It's very shiny, and it's on a timer, so it wakes up at 5 a.m. So by the time I'm, it's 5:30 now, so it gets, it warms up, gives me time to stagger over, make myself a nice cup, and be ready for what's to come.
Nice.
All right, perfect. I just wanted to kind of go into our sponsors here, which are our regular sponsors. We're sponsored by Lightning Junkies, the best place to get your Lightning Network fix. We're also sponsored by Amboss, the best Lightning Network explorer in the universe, now with communities that you can join. We're also sponsored by Zeus Wallet, the best way to take control of your Lightning Network node on the go, on your phone. They support all of the implementations, as far as I'm aware, LND, C Lightning, Eclair, please correct me if I'm wrong on that one, and also other things like LND Hub. So please check that out if you haven't already. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into our main topic here. Stephan, you recently had an episode with Rusty come out, I believe, this Wednesday or maybe last Wednesday. I can't remember.
Yep.
Yeah, so both me and Rusty also had the same same conversation last year. We had a bit of a more recent conversation more recently, but Bolt12 / offers has been getting a lot more out there recently. Rusty's been hitting that really well, getting it out there, having that Telegram group and having reviews for the developers and such. But I think it made a lot of sense to have, a podcaster focused, I'm a podcaster, I'm being a little selfish here, but also something that might, appeal to content creators generally, because I think I have this idea of being a sovereign podcaster or a sovereign content creator where I own as much of the stack as possible and I'm not relying on any third parties as often as possible. So I think to kind of kick us off here, Rusty, would you mind kind of giving us the brief overview? Like, I think everyone generally knows what offers / Bolt12 is, but would you mind just kind of going over it really quickly for us just to make sure we're all on the same page?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so offers or Bolt12 is kind of next layer in payments. So at the moment we have Bolt11, right? That's the invoice format that we use. Just get a QR code usually, or I've seen some NFC stuff happening. But either way, your phone gets this thing and it goes, "You want to pay this?" And you say yes, and it pays, right? And that works as far as it goes. But a Bolt12 invoice is static. Is dynamic. It's only single use, right? So you're supposed to generate one of those for everyone who may ever want to pay you, right? Now, Bolt12 can be a very similar experience, scan and go, but it's actually static. So you can have one, and what happens underneath the covers is that when you scan it, reaches through the Lightning Network itself, and your node mints a fresh invoice for that particular request, and that's what they actually end up paying, right? So we call it an offer because it's kind of like the step before an invoice, right? And it has a very similar flow, but because it has that reach through the network and grab the real invoice, you can do some interesting effects. Like, you can have recurrence, we can have proof of payer, we can have a whole pile of things that we've kind of always wanted. And this gives it to us. And it is kind of worth noting there's a second flow for offers, which is the kind of ATM, the withdrawal flow, where instead of offering, say, "Hey, you should send me a request for an invoice," it literally says, "You should send me an invoice and I will pay it for you," right? But the normal case is is kind of equivalent to like the Bolt11 case, where it's literally, "Hey, scan this and you will send me money and I will send you something, whatever it is I'm selling." So yeah, and obviously being static, it means serving it on a web page, putting it on a T-shirt. All those uses are up for grabs, right? Is that a fair summary?
Absolutely. So yeah, I really appreciate that. And then going along that same line, would you say that offers is kind of really up the alley of podcasters and content creators generally?
Yeah. So so obviously same way we have Bolt11 today can basically, you can decide not to fill in an amount. You can, and then the user decides how much they send, right? The classic tip jar kind of case. This is also true in Bolt12. So you can use it the same way. You can just have the whole, here, send me a tip. That's great. But the recurrence is very much a key thing for content creators. Most content creators want a kind of a reliable recurring income. Think Patreon example is the classic example of where they've tried to do this model where you can at least have some kind of steady stream. I mean, it's obviously not a binding commitment, but people have signed up and they once they've given you $5 a month for 3 months, you're kind of like, there's a reasonable statistical chance it'll happen for the fourth, and that is a much nicer for a steady income stream. Of course, if you're trying to do the Patreon way and you're using credit cards and everything else, there's a lot of hoops they have to jump through, a lot of infrastructure they have to create. This would be a DIY Patreon, right? It's just an offer that says, "Hey, pay me $5 a month," right? And obviously that's the dream, right? You kind of have this. Everyone who has a Lightning wallet could have the Patreon.
So it's kind of interesting that you mentioned Patreon there, because I've been trying to think through what I would want the stack to look like for myself, as far as, let's say I wanted to build out this membership thing where people kind of do these recurring payments or something. But I'm still struggling to understand what the interface might look like. Like, my naive sense is I would want almost a Patreon like GUI, where someone would go there, you would have all the similar things you would have on Patreon, like $5 a month and you get this prize, or $10 a month and you get this exclusive thing, whatever, what have you. How do you, for this is for anyone on the stage here, but how do you feel like this GUI, or this interface to these offers and these recurring payments is going to look like? Because I'm having a hard time really doing the full sketch on that.
Sure, yeah, let me jump in here. So I think if you look at, so we're not going to get feature parity with patreon.com, right? Just like patreon.com has, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe people will, but if you think about what Patreon has, they've got, as an example, members only content, right? Audio and video. Now I saw Anthony Roning, you recently did that. I see you're in the chat there as well, and you recently did that idea of that, Bitcoin, and you kind of did that thing. So I don't know, maybe that is a possible way, but I think maybe I'm not dreaming big enough, right?
Can we rewind right there, Stephan? Sorry to cut you off, but someone who may have not have seen it, what's this Bitcoin thing you're talking about?
So Anthony Roning did I guess we'd call it a proof of concept, where essentially he showed using AMP, this idea of actually shooting audio over the Lightning Network. Someone correct me if I'm explaining that wrong, but essentially it was like using the Lightning Network to sort of set up that way of moving the content around. So maybe that's something. And I know the Impervious.ai guys are thinking along similar lines. Maybe I'm not, to be fair, maybe I'm not explaining that technically in a precise way what happened there. But I guess the basic idea is, it kind of goes in this direction of not needing one server to send out all the material. And in that way, maybe you're less beholden to the YouTube or the Twitter or the Facebook shutting people down because of, for whatever reason, if they don't like what content you're putting out there. But I guess for me, circling back to answer, I guess, even when I was chatting with Rusty or even Chaz, when I was thinking about what you were suggesting, the way I was thinking of it is it would be like you have just a mobile wallet and it's got a little tab for your offers section, or maybe like recurring. And so you would see, okay, I've got, across, on the monthly basis, I've got, $1,000 coming in, and I can use that $1,000. Obviously, you can spend that $1,000 to fund the podcast or the YouTube or whatever it is you're doing. So that's maybe one way you could think about it. I think it does rely on it being really simple and having been around for a while. So, I think it's one of those things where, like, that's the thing. People who are on this spaces, listening to this spaces, are much more inclined to be like really into Bitcoin and Lightning. But where it really moves the needle is when people who aren't even in this world are able to use it easily. And for now, if we looked at someone who's outside of this Bitcoin and Lightning world, if you look on YouTube and they want to take donations, what are they doing? It's taking a static donation address, right? They've just got a Bitcoin on-chain address, just like people did back in Bitcoin Talk forums in 2011 and 12. They just had a Bitcoin address and they just said, yeah, you can pay me here. Now, obviously, as fees rise and so on, and for smaller amounts, you need Lightning. But we're just kind of, it's not there yet that those people are doing a new address for every payment, as an example, or because let's say they want to put it in the description box of the YouTube description box, they just want to put one address. So obviously with Bolt12 and offers, it could be like a little string that you put in there and that's your offer. And, maybe it could be like they've set it up, the likes of, the getumbrel.coms of the world, or other, Raspberry Blitz, so on, other Lightning nodes out there could sort of help you spin this up and be like, hey, here's your offer, here's your little string, you go and paste that wherever, and people can now pay you. But then we also have that UX and UI challenge and the educational challenge of teaching them about incoming capacity, right? Because if you really want to be more self-sovereign, well, then now you've got to also think about, well, do I have incoming capacity? And that's like for a total, like obviously for a Bitcoin Lightning person, you understand this, right? You know, okay, Lightning channels are like an abacus and you need to have enough, you know, beads on the other side that they can push over to you. But people outside our world would not know that, right? So then from their point of view, they're just going to be thinking, oh, I just pasted it there and then the payment failed. What, this thing sucks. You know, I want something else. I'm just going to go custodial, you know? So it's kind of like, how do you solve all of those aspects of it at the same time as well? So I think it's kind of like a holistic approach there. But of course, you know, with the likes of the Moons, the Phoenixes, the Breezes, they can help you a little bit with that incoming capacity aspect with, you know, turbo channel in your favor, in your direction, that kind of thing. But I guess that kind of magical just works feeling might be a bit difficult if someone, as an example, wants to send you 50 sats just as a one-off donation, and your channel, like, you know, that's not going to be worth opening a whole channel over 50 sats, right? So it's kind of like, how do you communicate that to someone who's not in our world? Obviously, the hardcore Bitcoin and Lightning people understand that, but how do you quickly and succinctly communicate that to the people outside our world? That's probably the interesting question, right? What do you guys think?
Wow, so you unpacked a lot of problems there. Yeah, so there's a whole pile of things here, right? The liquidity problem, I mean, to some extent, we're seeing a more dynamic, I guess, you know, aggressive competitive market for liquidity. So, you know, I think someone wants to send you 50 sats, someone will take that as a signal as, hey, it's worth me opening a channel to you because, you know, because it's more likely to be more people. You know, you've got a YouTube channel. The first person wants to send you 50 sats. There's probably a few more behind that. So it's worth me opening a channel to you. How we get that signaling out is kind of interesting, right? And as you know, there are a number of services that will do that. Turbo channels is something we're speccing now. So there's a number of ad hoc ways of doing it, but it's like we should probably make this a thing, right? Turbo channel should be in the standard. It's like everyone can do turbo channels. There's a couple of twists in there, but I just posted a draft. Hopefully we'll see that. It does require some trust, right? If someone opens a channel to you and hasn't confirmed yet, you're kind of trusting that, you know, you've got to trust them if you want to use the channel before it's on chain and nailed down. But for a lot of scenarios, that makes perfect sense, right? If it's a donation and like, you know, async or someone open a channel to you, you're like, I'll take the risk, right? You know, worst case, I don't actually get those sats that someone's trying to send to me if you screw me over, but you're reasonably well known node, and I'm happy to take that risk in return for, you know, instant payments. I think we will see more of that. So that, you know, we are kind of wrestling our way around some of these liquidity problems. But yeah, here's a QR code for your levels is kind of straightforward, right? That's a straightforward mirror of, you know, when I talk about Patreon, I'm talking about the pay side, not the other, the content side and things like that, where you give your exclusive content. But the best way to do that is basically you serve an encrypted blob somewhere, and when they pay, they get a key that decrypts it, right? Now, again, that requires infrastructure. Someone's got to write that. It's got to, you know, be standardized, and everyone's got to have it and all those things. But there are definitely ways of doing that. And Anthony's trick of basically streaming 150 kilobytes over 200 part payment across the network was spectacular. But I'm not sure that we're going to see, like, you know, movies streaming across the Lightning Network payments anytime soon. Or at least I hope not, because I'm not sure all the nodes will appreciate it.
Yeah, certainly. Go on.
Sorry, I was just trying to take out the one thing that struck me from what you were saying, Stephan, is, you know, from the pay side, you know, how long is it going to be before, you know, it's going to be as, you know, easy for the end user? So someone that's consuming the content, you know, they go to, let's say, this live stream. If I happen to have a author's QR code in there, you know, how hard, you know, would it be really? And so I guess my question is, would all the work end up being on the wallet side? You know, would we have to go kick Evan's butt over here and be like, put in Zeus, and make sure that happens or whatever? Or, you know, like Sahib over here, getting it in to ride the Lightning, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you guys see that, you know, coming about? Like, do you think it's just going to have to be these wallet providers,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah, I mean, I'm speculating, right? But my speculation is we will see a multitude of things, right? We'll see kind of people use LNURL in the meantime because that kind of gives them what they want for right now, something closer to what they want. But I think the long-term answer is the offers thing. So I see it like all the wallets would just build in like everything, right? They can be like, I can make an on-chain payment, I can make a LNBC, standard Bolt12 payment, or I can do the LNURL, or in the future, do a Bolt12 offers style thing. And so I'm guessing, I'm speculating, right? But I think that is the way it would probably go. And then I see it like offers would be like the long-term, technically more scalable and more sort of open approach is my speculation on how that might work. And then, the payments aspect would just be kind of like you spin up a wallet and it spits you out this little copy paste thing, and you copy paste that into everywhere, whether you're a content creator, or maybe it gives you an equivalent QR code, and you can then paste that onto your Twitch stream or whatever it is, into your YouTube channel. And then that's how people can just reliably pay you with the Lightning Network. So that's my speculation. What do you think, Rusty?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. So you almost, and then not quite Chaz, but you were always kind of denigrating wallet authors. So in my mind, early on in the Lightning Network, like all the action was like at the protocol level, and how do we do Lightning and HLCs and all that level of stuff, right? It's kind of nailed. I mean, there's still there's some great. That's still happening 100%. But in my mind, the development and the action has gone one layer up, and it's the wallet devs who are really pushing the boundaries. And I shout out to like Breeze Wallet here for like their live podcast kind of, payment stuff and that kind of stuff. That's not trivial to implement, write, spec and do all that stuff, right? But wallet authors are really stepping up with the stuff that they're doing. And so this is where the exciting development really is happening now. And that's more visible to end users. But yeah, I totally expect them to support an amazing amount of things in the meantime as we sort out what the future is. In particular, there's not only is there the obvious case. One of the first requests I got from Shesek, who writes the Spark Wallet front end, he goes, "Can I have one QR code that's an LNURL and an offer?" Which means basically encoding the offer inside the LNURL. It's certainly possible. I've got to talk to the LNURL folk and go, "Cool, can I grab like an O equals that?" Hopefully will be ignored by older clients, but new clients go, "Oh, cool, there's an offer in there. I'll pull the offer out and use that if I want to." The other thing is a Bolt12 instead of Bolt11, which seems really weird, but again, one QR code, right? It's awkward to have these two. I'll scan this if you're a Bolt12. What the hell is Bolt12, right? So there's going to be some bridges in there to help people smooth things. But wallet authors are doing amazing work, and their feedback has been really, really good, like incredibly useful. On offers, like it's been great. I'm like, I should have kicked this off 12 months ago and got all this feedback, but second best time is now, right?
Yeah. So, hey, Chaz, I just wanted to offer my 2 cents on this topic, from a UX standpoint. To answer your question, yes, of course, wallet devs have to do the work. They have to support offers or Bolt12, right? That's one thing. Second thing is, if you're looking at, what an experience would be like, then basically, your wallet will scan the QR code, right? Or put in that LNO string where the wallet indicates pay, right? And then the wallet will interpret that string to determine, okay, is it a recurring payment or a one-time payment? If it is a recurring payment, right, it should save that in its configuration that this is what is the frequency of that recurring payment and amount, etc. And then keep that as a schedule, a payment schedule, right? And prompt to the user that this is a recurring payment with this particular schedule, with this particular amount. Do you want to approve? Do you approve this on a regular basis, right? So user hits approve, and then you have this recurring payment set up. So now your offers are set up. Your wallet should now be looking at the frequency in which it needs to pay, and it should just every time that frequency hits, it wakes up, requests the invoice, and makes the payment. So you don't have to actually do any active management after that. The only thing that you need to do maybe is look at your recurring payments on a periodic basis and make sure that you actually wanted to continue to support those payments. That's all that you need to do, really, from a UX standpoint.
One thing just to add as well is if we look back at how when SegWit came out in, was it August 2017, right? And there was all this kind of kerfuffle around, and even when I'm like trying to teach a new coin, oh, hey, you buy a Bitcoin and you pull it out to your wallet, and then they would be like, oh, but my exchange doesn't support, or they would, like, the exchange wouldn't support it, right? So there was like some of those little teething issues that came around with it. So it's going to be a bit messy, and it's going to take some time for it to truly win out at the end and like be available and supported, right? Because there might be some wallet developers or whatever, not to attack them, right? But just like they might have made a Lightning wallet and they're not as plugged in these circles or not as interested in Lightning offers, so there might be some of those teething issues around that. And it's, the ideal, right? The ideal is it's all ubiquitous. Everyone's Lightning wallet supports offers, and every streamer, podcaster, YouTuber, any content creator person, or even a writer, they know to use this offers thing, but it's going to take some time to get there, right? And information that to us doesn't necessarily filter out to the masses easily, and it's going to take some time. But I'm still bullish overall. I just think just be realistic about how widespread it will be, right? Even like podcasting and streaming for Sats is it's it still has to grow.
Yeah, look, that's absolutely true, right? Now we can kind of see the end point. It's worth getting there, right? But yeah, we're always going to have this painful transition of going, oh wait, hold on. And look, the other thing is, so one of the reasons that this is why I'm furiously working on tooling for wallet authors, like in JavaScript and Python and anything else that people kind of want. And I've actually got a Summer of Bitcoin student who's working on the JavaScript implementation of Bolt12. And the reason this stuff is important is that, not only will early on, like there'll be bugs or, oh yeah, it does, but it doesn't support recurrence, or, there'll be these kind of teething issues where as people work their way through. And I encourage wallet authors, by the way, to reach out over any issues and kind of, ping me, tell me what they're doing, see in any way I can help, particularly because Bolt12 is still a draft, right? So if there's something that you want or that you hate, now's the time to bug us about it, right? So we can close that. Because that's the other thing, Stephan, is right. It is still a draft, right? Somebody could come along and go, oh, we, convince the world that we really need this in the first version of Bolt12. Then in theory, hopefully not, but in theory, we can still break the format, right? This is still a little bit reckless because we all see that end day when it's like, it's ubiquitous and it's fantastic and it's supported everywhere and it's this great standard and everyone goes, wow, this is really nice. It has everything I want, et cetera, et cetera. And it's simple and et cetera, right? So, the road ahead is going to be rocky, right? There's going to be a lot of work for people, and there's going to be some confusion of like, okay, so what do I do? Both on the acceptor side, should I use the LNURL? Should I use the offer? Should I use the Bolt11 button? Whatever. But yeah, I think I've been really impressed with just the rate of progress in the Lightning ecosystem. Like people are eager for stuff, right? People are exploring and actively, contributing and trying stuff out, and they really want to, they want to be one of the early adopters as well in a lot of cases. So
thank you, Rusty, for setting it up so beautifully here. Let's see. I do want to give a huge shout out to podcastindex.org as well as satoshis.stream. And those have been two projects which have really stood out to me to add value blocks to the RSS feed for podcasts. So it essentially allows like a wallet to be paid through a wallet like Breeze, so that listeners can stream sats or send a boost at a certain point in the podcast. And I've really appreciated that feature as a content creator, because you do get to see the exact minute, the timestamp in this content where they boosted or where they started streaming sats. So I found that an incredibly useful tool for being able to tailor content, because you could actually do the research and find out what kind of content are my listeners really interested in or engaged in. I would take a look at those projects to kind of get a good sense of what sort of features are already being used, and then where it could go from there. Very excited about Bolt12 taking the reins here.
Yeah. So podcastindex.org is great. The boosting is something, when somebody told me that, I went, holy crap, that's awesome. I never would have thought of that. But also, in a way, like, they can isolate from, they can switch underneath the covers to like Bolt12 and really, at some point when everyone has already adopted it. So, in some ways, that abstraction level gives them a way of kind of papering over the transition for the user base in a way that ideally no one will notice. They'll suddenly, one day they'll be using offers underneath, and it'll and it'll be like a nothing, right? To some extent, that nothing will change. There are some efficiencies to be gained from using offers underneath, but I love Bolt12. I love podcastindex.org, because I think this is exactly the kind of people who are driving new uses. That's so exciting.
Yeah, actually, I invited them to this chat because I very much want them to get into Bolt12, get into offers, because I would love for them to use their magical brain to help out podcasters, basically. I brought up Ricardo. Did you have a question for anyone on the stage, Ricardo?
Yeah. Wait a second for my mic to work.
Okay, and in the meantime, really fast here, Evan. So you're
Hold on.
Go
ahead.
Sorry,
my mic wasn't working correctly. Yeah, I have a question. I believe that I'm using Lightning for maybe, I don't know, a couple months, and super excited. But in my inner circle, actually. But I've read a lot about some podcasters getting some sats for their content, and I wanted to support it. Try to test the tools. They talk a lot about Sphinx podcast or something, and other apps that I constantly am trying to find out where can content creators maybe put out some content myself, but I actually can't find the right tools, even kind of considering myself a kind of saving the space. I cannot find the tools even to support the podcasters. Even trying to find the information online is kind of a pain. I don't know if you could guide me through, send me some one-on-one tips to go ahead and support many Bitcoin podcasters out there.
Sure. So what I think it's basically what we were just talking about. Basically, Breeze Wallet, Sphinx and Breeze Wallet and all these other things use the podcastindex.org value block backend. I'm probably saying that wrong, but you know what I mean. So it's essentially to get to that functionality, you could just use Breeze Wallet, one of the more popular Lightning wallets out there, to get that functionality and pay it out to them or whatnot.
Okay.
And then on the content creator side, you can go to satoshis.stream to follow some step-by-step instructions on how to get your podcast set up to receive Satoshis over the Lightning Network.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. So I was kind of curious with Evan here, kind of going back to what we were talking about as far as, wallet integrators go. From your side, Evan, what are your thoughts about all this? You're a kind of overworked guy over there.
We do support C Lightning Rest in Zeus. We could offer up support for offers through that. I would love to do that. Obviously there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of different components upstream to us, but as soon as it's practical and pragmatic, I would love to have offers In app, yeah, I'm just incredibly intrigued by the prospect of like having, you know, a list of subscriptions to, you know, different services and content creators, and being able to manage them all in one place. I think we get like this great user experience increase that I would definitely say is a 10x increase. While with dealing with your subscriptions, just by being able to deal with them in one place, like to see, okay, this is what I spent this month. Here are all my subscriptions. Being able to cancel them in a click, all on the same menu. That's the sort of, you know, from the user's perspective, like a great user experience bump that, you know, these legacy systems don't really offer. Like maybe you're on Patreon and you have a couple of subscriptions there, but, you know, generally speaking, all the content creators aren't using the same platform. So if we have a subscription system that's done at a protocol layer, there's going to be a whole lot of possibilities. Not only will, you know, you be able to manage those subscriptions on, you know, Zeus, but if you're connected to the same node, in theory, you'd be able to, you know, manage those subscriptions from any other wallet you hook into, like Ride the Lightning. So really excited by the possibilities, not just for the content creators and, you know, the new content these payments are going to enable, but what this is going to look like for users as well.
So this is something that, yeah, you point out really well. You know, the whole the recurring story, like what it looks like on credit cards today, is like kind of this a bit of a horror show, right? But you know, with this model, like it's very much the self-sovereign recurrence model, right? I approved it in the first place. I have a tab of like, hey, where are my sats leaking to? And I can go, no, I'm just going to stop that one. You know, let's kill those. And you're completely in the driver's seat, right? You were completely in control the whole time. And I think that is something that, you know, not just from a UX point of view, but just from a self-sovereignty and a control point of view, puts the user in exactly where they should be, right? Which is completely in control of their funds, which I think people will actually really love.
Yeah, absolutely. Like thinking about, you know, trying to make sure you're not getting charged again on your credit card. Like the fact that this is a push technology versus a pull technology, it's going to go so far. I'm so excited about it.
Hey, Evan, not to get too much into the weeds, but a few technical things that you should keep in mind, right? So, okay, you know, when a wallet is, let's say Zeus is scanning a QR code, which is actually a recurring payment. So that would require you, I think, or the wallet to save that configuration, right? And then also save some sort of a recurring schedule, which is basically, you know, the recurring schedule encoded in the offer. So you'll have to save that and be reminded every time, you know, that whenever that triggering schedule is coming up, that this needs to be paid. So this logic has to be built in the wallet, basically. It'll be outside of the protocol, right? So, yeah, go ahead, Rusty, if you want to say something.
Oh, so yeah, I was going to say, so Nadav of Spark is actually wrestling with this now, and we should probably all get together and figure out, because C Lightning now has a data store in the latest release and has a plugin for older ones, so you can stash the data in C Lightning. So just like Evan said, like however you connect to your same node, if we use the same format to store it, they should be able to see each other's recurrence. You won't have like some recurrences, oh crap, that's only remembered on this one or whatever else. I mean, it's a trivial amount of data. You got to remember like a couple of things, but you know, when's the next one due? What is it, right? What's the approval for, right? What did the user approve, right? Because you got to figure out if it's in the bounds. So one thing that we talked about that's worth mentioning is that recurrence is usually specified, it can be specified in sats, but for usually people want it in some kind of fiat amount, right? So what happens is, you know, they request the new invoice this month, they get an invoice for a number of sats. The wallet then checks, hey, is that, you know, the user said they'd pay $5 a month. I don't think that amount they've given, that looks like $6 to me. So at this point, I've got to do something, like ask the user, hey, this seems like they're either trying to screw us or you know, there's exchange rate issues or whatever it is. So you do kind of have to remember how much the user's authorized, right? Because some wallets might go, look, they want $5 a month. You've prepared to pay up to $5.50, like plus or minus 10% or something. You're like, sure, right? So there are a few like under the weeds details that we kind of got to get. It would be nice to kind of nail down early on. And then other wallets, as they kind of adopt offers, will presumably kind of follow the same format, and that would be great.
That's
Cool.
right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, not to be pumped about or kick work down the road or down the stack to like the node, but yeah, that's really exciting to hear about that data store in C Lightning, and yeah, just for means of cross compatibility across different wallets, I think that'd go a really long way. So yeah, perhaps we should get chatting with Nadav. That would be awesome.
yeah, it's funny because like I pushed it up the stack and he immediately pushed it straight back down.
Good old Nadav looking out for me. Cool, that's exciting. And Suhaib also just sent me his pending pull request for offer support in C Lightning REST. Oh man, I'm getting excited now. This is excellent.
So just to kind of throw this out here, the way that I was kind of formulating part of this event, whatever you want to call this Twitter space here, is the idea of being a sovereign content creator. What do you guys think about this?
What do we mean by sovereign? Like, see, my biggest question with all this stuff is whether the actual like exchange of the data, like the media, is going to be transferred on LN, which was sort of done with that proof of concept with that that audio clip Anthony put together earlier. And in that regard, if you're not really trusting a centralized third party to host your data, like that gets pretty crazy. But what did you mean by sovereign content creation? Because I think you're pretty sovereign right now, Chaz. That you're not beholden to anyone. Lightning Junkies is your baby, right? You're the boss.
Right. So yeah. So I think you're dead on though. So I think I am basically talking about that, and I guess the content would be maybe the last place, but I think it depends on where I'm hosting my RSS feed, for example. So unfortunately, in my case, I'm not that sovereign. I'm hosted by Anchor, which is owned by Spotify, which is probably the least good way to do that in the end. But I guess what I was talking about was more on the payment side, so much more on the Patreon-like support side of things. But I guess you made a very good point that I'm having to grapple with now. It's like, are we going to have something like Impervious that might do these things out of band? Because, yeah, I'm still unclear about putting this stuff directly on Lightning. I remember talking to Andreas about this like a year and a half ago, and he was kind of comparing it to Bitcoin SV in the sense that, they have their gigamegs or whatever over there, and he was concerned that if we did the same thing on top of Lightning, it would be the same kind of problem where all these different nodes are going to have to, hold this data in some sense or otherwise transmit it or what have you. So I guess, yeah, I would want as much of my stack to be sovereign as possible. So, I have my Lightning node, I have my RSS feed. Maybe eventually I could self-host that. That's kind of expensive, but yeah, like that's the kind of mentality. What do you guys think about all that?
Okay, so the question of like serving data over the Lightning Network. I mean, Lightning Network, if you look at it in the right lens, is already a communications network, right? It just happens to carry payments. You can't stop people from carrying other data, right? Almost by definition, like if it's encrypted and everything else, which it is, then they can transmit data through it. In fact, to some extent, with Onion messages, which are a simple extension to the Lightning Network that lets you deliberately send non-payment data. It's like if you're going to do it anyway, let's not force people to cram it in a payment, which is actually quite expensive for us to process. Let's have a messaging layer where they can send messages. So Onion messages are already an extension to the spec. That's how Bolt12 uses this whole I'm going to fetch an invoice from you, right? And they're much cheaper. They're basically just a forwarding a message thing. There's no state. There's nothing you have to remember. There's very little processing. You just have to unwrap it at the protocol level. So we've already kind of gone there. But it's a step between there and like actually streaming active content. Let's think about, your podcast takes off. You've got like 100 million users. It's pretty bad to, at that point, that's putting a lot of pressure on the network to stream all that content. I would think there are already things like BitTorrent for like mass decentralized distribution. That is probably the way to go. Now, would you send them like, the seeding information in that case over the Lightning Network? And maybe, you send them the decryption key if it's like, if there's some content that's, you have to pay for this content for this period of time. I mean, that will leak. Everything leaks, right? But, hey, you could send them an access key, and that's 32 bytes, right? So there's definitely going to be some trade-off there on how much data goes across the network and how much data gets, it goes through other means. But, Lightning, I don't think is ever going to be a bulk transport system, right? But we can do these kind of hybrid schemes, which I think will be pretty cool. And, again, like we're all going to be experimenting in this space, right? If you've got 10,000 downloads, maybe no one will care if you stream that over the Lightning Network, right? If people are making payments going back one way and they're getting a bit of data back, whatever. My node's getting paid enough. I'm happy. I'm not going to rate limit your messages because they're just not costing me that much. Now, at some point, right, maybe my node starts going, you know what? I'm going to start rate limiting these onion messages because this is just getting insane, right? So yeah, I mean, I think the network will find a balance here, and I'm quite happy with people, hey, streaming audio at the moment over things while we sort stuff out.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be a bit of a stretch to say it's all going to go over the Lightning Network itself. I think it's also a big ask to kind of try and tell everyone, hey, you've got to try and be fully self-sovereign and serve your own podcast data out there. Like, I can only imagine, for me, it's enough work to try and organize shows and do all that stuff, as well as become IT tech, and actually, we use CDN content delivery networks and DDoS protection for a reason, right? You guys might know my mate Katan, right? He's in the, Sydney Bitcoin scene, and he has written some blog posts on his self-hosted blog that he was hosting on his, in a little box at his place. But then one of his articles went big on Hacker News, and then it basically shut his thing down because he got the the Reddit hug of death or whatever, right? Internet scale is just ridiculous for people to deal with, especially if you're a GarageBand level operator. So that's always going to be there. And, of course, we want people to have maximum self-sovereignty where it's possible, but it's kind of a question of, is the juice worth the squeeze at this point, when if you get shut down on one, you can set up on another, and the convenience factor of having say the anchors of the world that cross distribute to the different platforms, whether that is, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, et cetera, it's kind of for now, we're probably going to be stuck with what we've got, because in my example, I couldn't imagine, setting up my own server to serve out my podcast. It's just not I'm just not that tech savvy, right? And I wouldn't have the time to deal with all that as well. Maybe someone made it easier, and maybe if someone kind of productized it and made it able to be done on some kind of VPS or something, and it was the BTC Pay server of, podcast serving or content serving, maybe. But I think for now, we kind of need the distribution angles that are available to us today with, the likes of YouTube and Spotify and whatever else.
Yeah, that's right. I agree with Stephan. There's a reason this stuff exists. And I love the idea of a lightning pirate radio kind of thing, but I think it's going to be pretty bleeding edge for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think people also need to realize that, being decentralized or self-sovereign is really not the ends. It's the means to the ends, right? If there's a need for it, and we got to take into consideration two things. I think Stephan made a really great point about the ease of use and the practicality for someone to do these things. That's going to be a major factor, but it's also going to depend on the environment in which we're operating in, right? All this discussion about a decentralized Twitter, for example, in Blue Sky or whatever we end up building in the next couple of years, that's only become a necessity because of the environment that we're in right now. Twitter has it's beholden to its shareholders, corporations, government, and as a result, we've seen a great amount of censorship. So really, the degree at which data will need to or will end up being transferred over the Lightning Network will depend on what the environment looks like as far as the content we're trying to distribute, and what the tolerance for it is on these pre-existing centralized platforms. So I do think there's going to be a lot of experimentation. I think there's going to be a lot of hybrid models where a lot of perhaps we use Lightning to coordinate the parties and incentivize them to put it up. But I do see a lot of this happening out of band until it really becomes necessary.
Yeah, and just to add to that, maybe I think it's kind of like the idea of you build it when it's ready or just before you think it's really necessary, because otherwise you could be spending that time building some other functionality. But I mean, humor me for a second. Like as an example, maybe it could look something like this, right? Maybe it could be like, okay, let's say I have my podcast and we use like some kind of BitTorrent system where maybe I host up the initial seed version of it. And you know how on like torrent sites or whatever, they had like that URI or the magnet link. And so maybe the podcast listeners could, find there was some app that coordinates all this, makes it all easy for them. Maybe it could be built into like the likes of Sphinx and Breeze, hypothetically, right? I'm just playing with this example. And then let's say my node or my server, my box or whatever, my VPS is the initial seed, but everyone just does it like a BitTorrent. So then all the listeners of my show might theoretically be streaming it out or uploading to help the bandwidth out to other people who want to listen to the show. So maybe that's I'm just giving you an example. Maybe that's what it could be. And that way it still kind of only uses that small amount of data just to give them the magnet URI link rather than streaming the whole thing through the Lightning Network.
Yeah, that would be actually pretty magical. Someone should build that.
All right, let's go.
When talking about this sovereignty aspect, I think it might be good to highlight not only could it be an opportunity for the content creators, but also for the listeners to maintain their sovereignty as far as the amount of information that they're sharing. Because one thing to point out is that you're going to have some additional privacy benefits towards just paying your content creators, and like when talking about providing information that isn't a payment, it might be good for content creators to optionally for the listener to communicate that information about like who I am if you want to send a thank you or you want to invite me to some exclusive event and whatnot in the future. So that might be something to kind of edge us towards that Patreon type model, but without including the requirement to hand over your name, your address, all of your payment data.
I'd love to chime in on that if it's possible.
Go for it.
So big fan of everyone in the group. I think some of us know each other because of what we're launching next week. But I mean, that's our entire position. So as some of you guys might know, Zion's launching on Wednesday, the 18th. And, we believe that not only should the creators have full sovereignty, my co-founder is one of the largest influencers in the world, but also the users should have sovereignty of their own data, which is why every single user has their own Lightning node. They only have access to their private keys. They only have access to we're using all the rails of like key send messages to actually move across the data layer and allowing you to have full sovereignty of the information. No one has access to what you're saying, how you're saying it, where you're saying it, who you're connected to, other than the people that have the private keys on your node. And you're the only one that manages the macaroons on that node. So that's our belief in the future of social has to be built in that way. And I think building it on Lightning allows for that layer of money, right? So most companies think of money as this afterthought. And I think building the relationship with your favorite creators on top of money is effectively the future of social media.
How do you think Bolt12 and offers plays into that?
I love it. I love it. Actually, one of my advisors sent over the Bolt12 thing, and I love how that will eventually integrate into kind of what we're working on. I'm still kind of looking through the docs and how we can actually involve those QR codes into the creator communities.
So there are two things that one of which came about because from feedback people had. So in Bolt12, there's two things. One is that when I request that invoice from you, I provide you with a payer key, right? And that's a transient throwaway key. I know how to generate it. You don't. And so that can be a basis for future relationships. In particular, it's a basis for refunds. If you ever need to give me a refund, I can prove it was me because I obviously can sign with that payer key and no one else can. But it opens the door to a whole heap of other things that you can tie to that key, right? It's a transient identity, so it doesn't, it's not an identity for me, but it's a thing. It's a thing that I have that I provided you with. So potentially there's an ability to build on top, right? Now you have this identifier for me if I want to send you something in the future. The other thing that comes in, which is kind of trivial, but someone asked for, and we added it to the specs, is kind of a payer note. So when I send you hey, I want an invoice for this, I can also just put like a description in there from my end, right? So, hey, I really loved your podcast, whatever it is. I can basically just put a little comment in that payment request called a payer note. And that enables a very simple way of just sending feedback. And it's interesting because that was a piece of feedback that came from people reading the Bolt12 spec and here's something I really, really want. It wasn't in there originally. It was added pretty trivially. So a good example of the feedback from people like yourself going, hey, here's the use case I have. I want this. So yeah, there's already kind of the at the protocol level, there's the infrastructure to do this kind of comms and establish these kind of higher relationships in a completely, anonymity preserving manner, right? Completely opt-in.
Will this be available on LND as well, or just C Lightning?
Oh, look, the point of the spec process is most of the stuff that's in Lightning today comes out of the spec process. So it goes through the spec thing where we kind of hash it out and we make sure it's all good, and then it gets implemented. To get into the formal spec, it has to be implemented by 2 independent implementations. So C Lightning's the first, and we're kind of playing around with it. We need at least one more, significant node to implement it completely independently, right? So it can't be a C Lightning derivative. It literally has to be, they have to crawl through and implement it from scratch and do it themselves. And at that point, it can be finalized in the spec. And at that point, right, okay, the gates are open. Now you don't have to be reckless. It's not going to change. It's in there. And at that point, I expect it to go through the other implementations. So it depends on, everyone has different engineering priorities as to what they do. And I can't speak for the Lightning Labs team. But there are also things that we can do on the side as a bridge, right? So it's actually possible. I know Just Jaeger, I think this has been merged. You can basically intercept messages, have an extension to LND now that can intercept messages in the next release. So you could implement a lot of offers kind of on the side of LND, even if it wasn't in the core. There are a lot of things that we can do, even without first class LND support on that side. And by we, I mean someone out there, not me.
We'd love. I mean, I love this concept, and we'd love to support your efforts in building this out on LND. And I think that there's a lot of creators on our side that would be really excited to have this product.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
All right. So kind of going from the social media aspect there, let me see here. So what do you think is currently missing from Bolt12 or from offers? Is there anything missing? Is there anything anyone would want to add? Oh, and by the way, if anyone wants to ask any questions, feel free to request the speaker privileges. But do you think that there's anything missing? Is there anything, maybe on the Stephan side, is there anything that you would want to see that you don't see in offers quite yet? Or, anyone else in the speaker or audience sections here?
I mean, from my point of view, I'm excited about the idea. I think it would need to see commercialization and kind of being put in a productization, maybe not necessarily commercialization, although that could be part of it. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's kind of like you have to sort of see which way the market is going, right? And see, are a lot of people using that? Because it's one thing for all of us Bitcoin and Lightning nerds to be into this stuff. It needs to be, the real test is, do non-Bitcoin and Lightning people get into it and use it? That's the real test, right? Of course, like, we will be all about it and shilling it hard, and I'll be out there promoting it. But, that's where the rubber meets the road, right? Because if you were to think of the hardcore Bitcoin and Lightning people, what's that? 20,000, 50,000 max, right? Really what it's about is getting it beyond that. And so, for that to happen, well, you need a certain level of convenience, a certain level of user experience, a certain level of UI. It needs to be slick, because Joe blogs on the street or whatever, Joe Sixpack, you're not going to tell him, oh yeah, hey man, go and like configure all this shit, use this thing, and for what? Why? Oh yeah, because it's more self-sovereign. And they'll be like, well, I don't care. Like I can already download what I want, right? You know what I mean? So it has to be made slick and convenient enough, or enough people have to have been cancelled off the normal internet and off the normal platforms that, people see a reason to do it, right? Because otherwise, why are they going to take the extra step, right? They would rather just use Google Podcasts or Spotify or whatever they're normally using right now. So I think that's the mark. And it's like I was saying before, I'm bullish. I just think it's going to take some time to get there, and we can't sort of expect it all to happen straight away.
Yeah, I do want to chime in here and say, so Bolt12 is extensible. We use the same format that we use across the wire for the Lightning protocol, and we've got experience with extending that. It's sort of built in that you basically, optional and compulsory extensions, and all that is formalized in the way Bolt12 works. So there are definitely some things that have been left on the floor because we can add them easily later. And the question is we don't want to. The spec's already pretty long, right? You kind of want to cut at some point. What's your minimum viable product that still leaves you open to future extensions? So there's been some stuff that's great that I've kind of pushed back on. Go, cool, we will add that later. That'll be in future versions. But so I definitely know there's some stuff that isn't there today. But like Stephan said, let's see how people use it, right? Before we add all this stuff that turns out to be really obscure.
So I think you brought up a pretty good or interesting point, Stephan. Excuse me. And so it kind of makes me think, okay, so is the first step, or maybe, a product that someone makes, like some kind of newbie wallet, some kind of custodial offers wallet that's dedicated to doing this or something? I don't know if that would really happen, but would that be entirely suboptimal to start with and kind of iterate from there, obviously getting to a non-custodial thing if we could help it, kind of thing?
Maybe. I mean, look, it's like okay, maybe a good example is when people talk about, say, OpenNode versus BTC Pay, right? It's like a similar kind of thing, right? If you talk about it on Twitter, someone will be like, no, don't use OpenNode because it's custodial, and use BTC Pay only, but it's much more technical. It's a lot harder for somebody. And so I'm not opposed to people just going to OpenNode to get started. Even if it is custodial Lightning, you've got to start somehow. And unless you're a Bitcoin Lightning nerd, you just need that easy way in. So maybe it's a similar thing there. You need a custodial, easy way to get started. And then later you try and learn more about, okay, now it's time to be more self-sovereign. I guess that's one way to think of it.
All right. And I think, Rusty, you probably have gone over this multiple times and maybe kind of somewhat already in this chat. But just for the sake of making sure we hit this here, could you let everyone know why maybe LNURL is kind of suboptimal compared to offers? Again, I know you've answered this like a million times, but.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. So I love LNURL, right? It filled a gap that was absolutely, it filled this huge void that we had between, hey, cool, we've got these invoices, but man, I really want something static. I want something short. I want something, all these things, right? So LNURL came along and filled that gap, which is great. But I'm more ambitious, right? I want the Lightning Network to, in my mind's eye, I see the Lightning Network I want to use, right? And LNURL requires basically a web request. The encoding is kind of awkward just on a technical level and stuff like that. But I really want something that's Lightning native, right? Built in, that everyone supports, that does this through the Lightning Network itself. So you don't have to have like a web server somewhere that's doing this redirect and everything else. You can literally, if you have a Lightning node, you can have full stack, right? You can do everything. You can take, you can have your static codes that everyone supports, that goes straight to my phone, and I am an equal self-sovereign Lightning participant to anyone else, right? It turns out actually having that web layer in there to serve things is actually quite a hurdle in practice to being a vendor, right? You need something that's hosted. You need something that has an HTTP, has an SSL certificate. All these, it does complicate the stack. And also, in theory, you should be reaching through that over Tor, and in practice, that is another hurdle for people to reach, right? But being able to reach through the Lightning Network and do it itself is definitely like a superior technical solution, but also just a far simpler solution for as far as like all the moving parts goes, right? Because I mean, if I can't reach you to get the invoice, it's okay because I couldn't reach you to make the payment anyway, right? So so in that way, like if Lightning works at all for you, then Offers will work for you, which I think is a great experience to have. And LNURL, very much when they came up with it was like here's a stopgap. Here's a whole heap of pieces that we need, and we're going to put it in like a web request, which is absolutely the right way to do it. And LNURL actually has some pretty cool stuff that Offers doesn't have, like channel opening and stuff like that. We very much focused on this whole invoicing and sending money flow, and we've kind of cut out that bit and go, cool, okay, we want to push this down the stack and have this as standard. So LNURL is not going to go away. It's still got some really good use cases, but this is, for that one part, it's like, this is kind of like the way we should have done it at the beginning, but we kind of had to learn, right? All the mistakes we made in Bolt11, all the things we learned since then have gone into like making Bolt12 a reality. But yeah, specs for recurrence and things are big, right? There's a lot of capabilities that people are really hungry for and that are just missing today. And that was definitely something that was driving Bolt12. So just a thing on the nomenclature, by the way, in case people are confused. So the Bolt's basis of Lightning technology is the RFCs, the specs for Lightning, and they have numbers. And we just increment them. So we're up to 12. So hence Bolt12. And so Bolt12 and Offers are kind of interchangeable, although Bolt12 is more than Offers. It's also how you request it and all that stuff through the network. But the terms Bolt12 and Offers are interchangeable. And Bolt12 is really a geeky way of saying Offers.
Kind of side question, kind of a tangent here. Is there anything that you think is currently missing from the Lightning Network that's not even to the point where you're speccing it out or writing it down yet, but it's still kind of bouncing around the back of your head or something like that?
Yes, always, right? There's always more, right? There's always more cool stuff we could do. There's stuff up the stack that I would love to see. There's stuff down the stack. I would love to see. I have an early draft for simplified payment commitments. I have an early draft for splicing existing channels, like splicing funds in and splicing funds out, that I would love to get back to. LND has anchors, which are a huge improvement, but require me to rework a whole heap of stuff so I can implement it properly in C Lightning that I would love to do. PTLCs are coming, right? We're getting Taproot. We really need to finalize the point time lock contract stuff. So I would love to see that move forward. So there are a pile of things at the protocol level that I would love to see. I would love to figure out how to validate vendors. So Bolt12 has Offers have a vendor field. It's optional, right? You can say, hey, this is whatever. If that's a URL, like that's that's blockstream.com, for example. It would be good to use the existing TLS infrastructure, like certificate infrastructure, the same way I validate blockstream.com when I go to the website, to validate that this node ID does indeed belong to blockstream.com. And there are a couple of tricks with doing that, because I don't want to reach out to blockstream.com because I don't want to compromise my anonymity, right? I'm just paying them, right? I don't want a relationship, right? So I don't want my wallet to reach out and just query some URL from there. So there are a few tricks around doing that in a way that I can still validate that is valid. So yes, to answer your question, there are about a bazillion things to do at the moment, all of which I'm trying to work on or make sure are being worked on. But that's always true, right? The Lightning Network is a new frontier, and it open horizons as far as you can see. Pick a direction and go in it. There's so much to do.
I have a question for Rusty. Rusty, in terms of privacy implications with Bolt12, is there any specific surface area which opens up or reduces from a privacy standpoint?
Oh, Suhaib, very good question. So, if you can make anonymous payments, you can request, because you're using the same mechanism, right? You should be able to request your invoice through the same mechanism, so there shouldn't be any extra trace there. Now, the caveat, of course, is at the moment there is, because at least C-Lightning will go, not enough people support onion messages for me to route a message through and back. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to directly connect to the node. You know how I said you shouldn't do that? That's what it does at the moment by default, unless you disable it. It'll go, you want an invoice from this person, but I can't get a route through to them. So I'm just going to open a connection to them and send the message directly, which is, fine for Bootstrap, but is a terrible, terrible thing for privacy in the long term, right? We should be routing through the full network, and that's definitely the end game, right? As all the nodes upgrade and everyone supports this, even in C-Lightning, it's not on by default. You've got to turn on the experimental option to say, yes, give me offers. I like being reckless. And when you turn on experimental offers, we start routing these messages for people. So yes, at the moment there are some privacy compromises, but on the flip side, it does get better once everyone's adopted it. And the other thing is that at the moment there's no vendor privacy as such, there are a couple of places like Moon Wallet that actually give you a little bit of vendor privacy. But in the protocol, there's no vendor privacy. Basically, you have to say, here's my node ID that I want you to send the sats to. But Offers does allow blinded paths. So in the offer, you can say, hey, here is the path to send it down, and you won't know where it's actually going. Now that's in the spec. It is not supported by C-Lightning yet because I just haven't plumbed in the piece where you add the path in the offer. So there's a to-do, but it's in the spec. And we use that mechanism to do the replies anyway. So all the pieces are there, it just has to be put together. So in the long term, this does open some new potential avenues for privacy. But in the short term, it's it's not a step forward.
Yeah, in the short term, it's understandable, I think. We need that adoption at the protocol level so that it can go through the onion routing, right?
Yeah. In theory, we could route it through a payment, but that's a little bit antisocial on the network to send a fake payment just to do this.
Got it. Okay.
So, yeah.
Thanks.
So to be honest, I have kind of run out of questions on my side. Do any of the other hosts have anything for Rusty or anybody else?
I thought Stephan brought up a really good point about the content delivery for like the distribution of this of the podcast and such, and listed off a whole bunch of kind of like fiat companies, and I just saw this technology improvement as a big opportunity for someone to create a more Lightning native distribution network for getting this content out there, because there is a lot of competition in the fiat space. But if some company were able to like understand this technology and then be able to distribute it to all the content platforms and build out the compatibility so that people could actually start paying the content creators directly, I would see that as a huge opportunity. So that's, thanks Stephan for bringing that up and pointing that out.
Yeah, I think we just aren't at the point yet where enough people have been cancelled that people care about it, right? Because most people are just on standard YouTube. They're not on the copycats. Most people are on Twitter. They're not on Mastodon. So it is just that fundamental problem of like, there's not enough people who demand it that way, that the products and the services and the solutions that work for that haven't been all built out and made nice and fancy and easy. And maybe they won't be as nice and easy as say the youtube.com, but they could be made a lot easier. And maybe, that kind of torrent streaming idea, maybe if you're a supporter of someone, you can help seed their content out to the other listeners or viewers, that kind of thing. That's just a few ideas.
Fantastic. So if there's any burgeoning entrepreneurs out there, you can jump on that opportunity.
I would definitely throw down some sats for that as well if anyone wanted to do that. Just saying.
So one more question, and I don't know whether you want to take it, but what is the take from other implementations on offers in general? Like, are they excited about it? And I know I should not address this to you specifically, but I have not actually heard a lot of inputs from other implementations. But I'll be curious to know if there is what kind of signals are we getting on this. I am excited about it. I think a lot of wallet developers are excited about it, but how are the node implementers thinking about it?
Yeah. So this is a good question. I mean, I can't speak for other implementers in general, so I'm not going to hold them to any kind of promises they might or things they might have said in private or whatever else. There's so imagine you're an implementer, right? And you're like, you've got all these things you could do. I mean, I just, despite the fact that it's like 6:30 in the morning, when Chaz goes, did you have any other stuff that it's kind of not there in Lightning yet? And I just spilled off like 6 things that I would like to work on right now as well. All of us are in the same boat. All of us have a lot of things to do, and so it's a question of priorities, right? It's like what rises to the top, and what's on fire right now. What do we need to do? And so I feel the pain of the other implementers, frankly. And so whoever does it second has to kind of chase a moving spec and get feedback and do all that work and everything else. Whoever does it third, like after it's in the spec, gets a lot easier to ride, right? Because they just have to implement it. They don't have to like get feedback on the spec and review it so much. They can just follow along. So there's also a temptation to lag, right? And I totally get this, right? Sometimes you don't want to be the pioneer. So so I definitely don't want to hold anyone's toes to the fire and go into this. Lightning Labs made it very clear that they're not interested. Frankly, it's not on their priority list. That kind of makes sense. I mean, if you look at their recent initiatives, they've been around these kind of like centralized services that they're offering that potentially can make them revenue. Offers doesn't directly attach to a revenue stream, right? I mean, it might make things better, grow the pie kind of arguments and stuff like that, but there's no, it's hard to argue to VC funders that you need to do more of that, right? So I kind of get where their priorities are coming from, and this is not it. Async, I don't know. TBAS, particularly over async, is an absolute machine with implementing stuff. And it would not surprise me to see something come out from them. They definitely want to do. They've had a lot of good feedback on the onion messages itself. Like that's an easy thing for people to add, even if they don't do full offer support. If they can route onion messages, that's great. So we may see something come out of there soon, simply because it's fairly straightforward to do. Matt Corello has been giving some really good feedback on the spec recently. Matt is working on LDK for Square Crypto. There's some, let's just say there's some horse trading in the background. He wants me to implement some things and push some things in the spec. So there's often this horse trading, right? Because you need 2 implementations. So you need to find someone else who wants to implement your beautiful thing in order to get it finalized in the spec. So there is some kind of horse trading going on with LDK at the moment as well. But it's a big deal, right? There's a lot of stuff to do to get offers, right? And this was somewhat deliberate, right? So we use Schnorr signatures, right? So suddenly, you can't just use the old ECDSA signatures that we use for everything else in Lightning. You've got to use the latest version of libsecp, and that may not have bindings for your language, and all, there are just things that we've put in that will make it great in the future that make it a little bit harder now. So there is a certain amount of just infrastructure work you have to do before you can even decode a Bolt12 invoice, right? Or technically not to decode it, but to check the signature, right? I think that's going to be a longer grind as far as getting all the implementers through. And to some extent, it's going to be led by the market, right? As more wallet support and more traction, there's more pressure on the node implementers to go, we should implement this too, because our users are asking for it and there's infrastructure ready. So you kind of got the chicken and egg problem. But ask me again in 6-12 months, and I think we'll have a very different answer.
Yeah, I think what I'm actually curious about, and I think you teased it out also, that there are 2 aspects of it. One is creating the complete offer implementation, and the second is support making the change enough so that at least the network propagation of offers is supported. If the latter is done, that is also a big step in my mind, right? Let's say LND supports routing of offer messages. I would be, very happy with even just that, right? So that at least the privacy implications are addressed. Yeah, I think those are interesting things to see and watch.
Well, yeah. I mean, to be honest, we could route it through payments today, right? So you could do a thing where you, okay, we can't find it. Well, we're just going to ram it through fake payments. We may get to that if the network's too laggy. The purpose of onion messages is to the same way same thing that op return serves in the Bitcoin mainnet is like, we don't really want to support this use case, but if you do it, let's do it in a way that's least harmful for the network. And that's kind of the onion message thing. It's like, people are going to do it anyway, so let's support it in a way that's least harmful. So onion messages are way more efficient for nodes than ramming stuff through payments, but you could use payments if you had to route these messages. We've chosen not to at the moment because it's still really early. But if we get to if it's finalized in the spec and we have our implementations and they're still laggers, we may have to, people are going to start doing it. People are going to start sending this data through literal payments, which look, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So yeah, I would love to see onion message support more broadly.
All right, and then I had a question. So, Rusty, you started a Telegram channel dedicated to Bolt12, and you've had some reviews with developers, I believe. Do you want to tell the audience a little bit more about that, and give maybe some calls to action if you wanted to throw those in there?
Yeah. So at this point, if you're a wallet dev, or you're just kind of, particularly if you're at the dev level and you're curious about what's going on with Bolt12, Bolt12.org has a link to the Telegram group, which is like t.me/Bolt12org. And we hang out there. It's a good place to ask questions and catch up with like what other projects are doing, and some of the support libraries that are available, and give feedback and stuff like that. It's still very alpha for the npm and the Python packages, but we'll be going through revs of that, and I expect more people to like produce support stuff, and that's kind of the hub that we're forming for kind of offer development. And it's a good place to ask questions, right? I was reading through and I couldn't understand this, or how would I do this, and things like that. It's great. I hang out there. It's great feedback for me to kind of think about the spec from different perspectives. And yeah, if you're interested in developing Bolt12 stuff, offer stuff, that would definitely be the place to hang out at the moment.
And then, along the same lines, what about people that aren't developers? So maybe someone like me that's a, content creator. What could we do besides getting you into a Twitter space and asking you a bunch of questions?
Well, at this point, keep your eyes peeled, because there are a few more things coming out that are more user accessible for like, you start to see it appear in the wild, like polofeed.com has an offer now, so you can feed the chickens via an offer. You will see these things pop up, and I expect to see more front end supporting it. Suheb obviously is looking at support for RTL. If you so C Lightning has native support at the moment, but you've got a kind of it's command line level. Nadav has just dropped in the Bolt12 this morning, and I haven't actually. I woke up and saw it and haven't actually installed it yet. Latest like alpha version of Spark that supports offers, and Spark of course is a front end to C Lightning. So for him it's pretty easy. Like he just plumbs into the existing APIs. It doesn't support recurrence yet, but that's coming. So there are going to be increasingly as developers work their way up the stack, there'll be more stuff appears that you can go, cool, I can play with that, I can test it, I can see what it's like. But also go to Bolt12.org. It kind of has a nice top level summary. And that may get your creative juices flowing as far as how would I use this, and the next step. Okay, so if I do use it, what will it look like? And what do I need from developers? Right, that's your opportunity to push developers and go, hey, make sure you implement this, or asking them how they would do this stuff is kind of important as well. But of course, I need to do the caveat here, right? That this is still a little bit reckless, right? The spec is not finalized until it's finalized. So don't get your, as Bolt12.org says, do not get your QR code tattooed just yet, because the spec may change and then no one will be able to use it to pay you.
Well, I think with this group, I think we were the folks that were reckless at the very beginning, starting before they had static backups. So, I'm not sure we're going to listen to you on that. Hopefully someone's going to have an offer tattoo shortly. All right, Vivek, you wanted to jump on here. Did you have anything for us?
Yeah, I had a general C Lightning question for Rusty. I get these questions a lot, I guess, lately. I was wondering maybe what were the design questions for how we do it with one channel per node, and I guess other implementations have multiple channels. I guess I've been hearing things about they like this whole shadow chain perspective with having private channels with the same node to balance and things like that. So just wanted to hear your general thoughts about that.
Oh, this is a good question. It's a classic thing, right? So early on in C Lightning, we decided, look, we're not going to support multiple channels to the same node because it's more efficient on chain if you use splicing to to change your capacity and stuff like that. Plus, it's better for the network if rather than establishing two channels with the same node, if you can establish a channel, establish it with someone else, right? It gives more redundancy in the network. It's all good, right? And that was a great thought 4 years ago when splicing was just around the corner. Well, 4 years later, it's still just around the corner, right? So probably one of my worst design decisions. It's one of the reasons that C Lightning is pretty eager to do splicing, is because that would avoid me having to implement. I actually put a Twitter poll. I said, should I bite the bullet and redo the infrastructure so that I can do multiple channels to the same one, or should I push on splicing and go, get off my ass and put the engineering work in to finalize splicing so we could add and subtract from channel? And everyone went, just do splicing, Rusty. Now, that may be because they're not C Lightning users and they don't care. They just want me to push the spec for splicing. But yeah, I mean, to some extent, it's good for the network if you encourage people to have diversity in their channels and push them out. And secondly, it's good for me because it makes me more likely to implement splicing as soon as I can, so that we can kind of work around this limitation. But yeah, I mean, ideally, you would. There are actually some uses to have multiple channels in the same place, but I would argue that you're better off having redundancy across things. But you definitely want to be able to enlarge your channels, and without splicing, that is painful at the moment in C Lightning, and I appreciate that, and I apologize. But yes, I see this glorious day when we will have splicing in and out of channels, and it just that is really where we want to be, right? And so for those, like it sounds, as you'd expect, splicing is basically just an on-chain movement in or out of a channel. So you can basically go, cool, I need to take some sats out of this channel to pay something on-chain or move it off to cold storage. I will go do that. And when you start that negotiation with your peer, right, they can pile on and go, cool, well, while you're here, I'm going to also put this in and I'm going to do this, right? So with one transaction that could do multiple things. It could splice out of a channel, open a new channel, open multiple channels, do all this at once, right? So I think increasingly we're going to be taking these opportunities whenever one side wants to do something on chain, the other side will have stuff batched up, in the future. Whereas, cool, well, okay, well, if you're making a transaction, let's do all these things at once, right? And just, you can use loop out and things, but I think it is better to be able to do a direct splice into your cold storage, for example. So yeah, that's the reasoning behind it. But yeah, it didn't quite work out. The timeline didn't quite work out. There was always something even more important and even cooler to do than splicing. But I promise you, I'm not going to say 2 weeks, but it is coming. It's funny that Lisa said to me, so Rusty, do you want me to do splicing? Because it always seems to be on the not quite the top of your to-do list. And I'm really tempted to take her up on that.
Well, she just finished Liquidity ad, so maybe.
Yeah. Yes, I know. It's tempting to go, yeah, you should totally do it. But she's got a pile of other projects as well.
For whatever it's worth, Rusty, I voted for multiple channel supports on that poll.
It was you. It was you.
So we have Wall Street. I can't see your last part of your name. Did you have a question?
Don't you know, pump it up. You got to pump it up. Don't you know, pump it up. Bitcoin is worthless.
Did we have anything more than that, or?
He's just pumped we're pumping. So, yeah, shouts to the weekend bump.
All right, then. Okay. So I don't have too much else on my side. Do you guys have anything else on your side, or I might be looking into wrapping this guy up here?
Yeah, nothing else for me. It's been a good discussion. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I think it's been great. I
All
look forward
right,
to
so
hearing
I
more
think.
from people.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, it's been great feedback, and I love the excitement that everyone's got around this. That obviously I share. So, yeah, if afterwards you come up with things that you want to ask or whatever, just ping me on Telegram.
Really fast, could I get Anthony Ronning up here? Because I kind of want to ask him about the Impervious thing. And I think with having everyone else up here, it might be kind of fun. Would you be up for that, Anthony? Por favor. Thanks, man. So do you want to explain? Because, like, I think we did at the very beginning, explained what went on, but do you want to explain, you know, a little bit from your side what that Impervious.ai thing was?
Yeah, specifically about transferring the data or
Yeah, exactly.
the audio file.
Yeah, the kind of relevance to the topic here, sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I heard in when Rusty and Stephan was talking about it, I 100% agree. We're not going to see movies or maybe even we probably won't even see like full entire podcasts going through a lot of this. Like what it's basically doing is just splitting up the payments. And as if it were a single payment, a lot of implementations have like MPP today. This one's with LND's AMP to split up payments. So there are still limits, and I believe there's still like MPP timeout concerns. So like I don't even think I haven't tested the limits, but I don't even know if like thousands of split payments are going to be possible or not. But it really just wanted to show off the fact that you can, you know, as we start seeing more data intensive use cases of Lightning, you know, maybe we're not always doing 150 kilobits or anything like that, but even just, you know, 1, 2, 3 to 10 to 15, you know, for as data applications may want to use that, then it is still possible. We can take advantage of the fact that, you know, we could probably consistently start doing like 10 to 20 split payments without an issue as well. So, but yeah, it's really just all about like taking data and like sticking it into TLV records and blasting that through the network. It's cool because like I believe that data gets padded anyways, right? So it's not even really adding data to the actual, you know, what the payments that are flowing through the network, because if it's not full, then I think that gets padded anyway. So it's not even that much of a burden at all besides like splitting up payments. But yeah, those are just my general thoughts on it. Just the idea of being able to extend the amount of data you can send currently, especially even for like just messaging use cases, you know, being able to send paragraphs of text to another person.
Yeah, it was an awesome hack. It was really impressive. I loved it. And you're right. Yeah, you always spend 30 and 66 bytes. We always pad it the same length just for like privacy reasons, so you can't tell how much is actually in it. So you know, most of it's junk in most cases, right? So you can always just shove more data in there.
Yep, and I definitely want to. You know, we're building things in a way where we could support C Lightning as well, and I definitely want to see what we can do with offers as well. So I'm excited about that, and kind of playing with both technologies is really helping me learn.
Nice.
So what would you say you imagine, you know, you did this little thing with the Bitcoin audio file or whatever, but it's like, do you see, like, how do you see this being practical maybe for a content creator? You kind of mentioned like text, but do you see it going beyond that?
I'm not so sure yet. You know, with content creation, you know, maybe we can get to the point where we're sending like images through it as well. Those are like megabytes instead of just kilobytes. So like maybe we can get to that limit. I know like it also, I haven't really fully tested the limits of like what's possible. I am testing on testnet and, routing through a couple hops, but I haven't done anything like too crazy yet. So I don't know yet if we'll get to the point where we're like even able to send like images through this way reliably. That's the key, reliably. If someone spins up like hundreds of channels, that way they can like have a bunch of in-flight payments just to be able to like send images. I think that's kind of a stretch. I think reliably, it's probably just going to end up being like for text or like small little files. I think like a cool little like walkie-talkie use case where like you don't really care if it takes 30 seconds or a minute to get to the sender. You could just like have a 10-second little audio file and you can go back and forth. But yeah, I don't know if we'll get to that point where content creation can actually go through the Lightning Network, but we'll see. I'm definitely going to test out the limits and see what's like theoretically possible and what's like practically possible.
Yeah, you have 60 seconds on the default timeout, right? So that's the spec. Sort of suggest a 60-second timeout. So if they got to get all the pieces in 60 seconds, otherwise they send back a message going, no, it didn't work. That's a reasonable amount of time, though. And with Speaks or something that's like really dense coding for like, for voice, like Speaks is designed for voice audio rather than like music or something else. You could probably cram quite a lot in there.
But the limitation is though.
Speaks.
Sorry, guys. The limitation though is like the parts have to be determined ahead of time for the payment though. Like, would there be some sort of way to perhaps like, do like a streaming, like beyond the streaming of the sats over Lightning? Like, could you do streaming content like this over Lightning Network theoretically, or where's the real bottleneck if we were to try to do that?
At that point, I would be pushing you towards onion messages when they're supported because, one, they're a lot lighter on the network than routing through payments. Secondly, you could send the onion message. When you get the ACK for that, you send the payment, which contains the key that decrypts the stuff in the onion message, right? So they still have to pay for the content, but they get it. They just can't do anything with it until they do the payment bit. Would certainly be possible, right? So you'd still do a key send. You just send the data on the side. But then we're kind of headed towards this hybrid model where you go, well, if you're doing really bulk data, you should do that over BitTorrent, and then we just send you the seeding information when you make the payment. So at what point you go, well, this is getting silly. We're cramming too much data in, and we're sending these like micro streaming payments. I don't know, but the fact that it was like 150 kilobytes over 200 payments, I believe, Anthony. So that's actually not too bad bandwidth, right? It works surprisingly well. That was the impressive thing.
Yeah, and I think it was like under a minute. I forgot the exact timing on that, but it was under a minute. I think that it actually went through. And then at Impervious as well, we also have like APIs to like do socket to socket connection requests over Lightning. So you basically communicate through Lightning to another node, and then from there you get like socket information back, and you can connect via just an IP socket, and then have and that's where you stream your data through. So we're trying to like also like bridge the gap between have a good balance between like what data you want to send through Lightning, what data do you just want to connect with that other node and then start sending the data, like the actual data through sockets or things like that. So like we're trying to explore like kind of balances, or at least like give the tool set to developers so like they can do that on their own.
Would it make sense to go back to the 1990s and grab all their compression schemes and start using it now, like start using Real Player? I'm not sure if anyone remembers Real Player from the 1990s, but that was terrible.
Well, I bet we're going to be developing the Real Players, a few of those, as we're experimenting and seeing what works and what doesn't. So I'm sure there will be many Real Players of this generation, Chaz. So I think you're in for some luck. Anthony, are there any other protocols you guys are thinking about for out-of-band communication, or has it been focused on sockets?
Yeah, we're always thinking in these terms. I know like WebRTC is one that we're looking at, and I'm not even like that much of like a network engineer. We have some really good engineers that are like in that space. So like I'm not the best person to ask about that. I'm just trying to build out all the stuff that they're doing. But I know like we're also doing like VPN connections too. So you're just like you can like do VPN handoffs and like get into their network itself. And then that opens up a whole lot of use cases. So, and then there's even like just VoIP itself that we're looking at. So like there's a lot of cool things. I think like the main thing is like just standardizing the handshaking that goes on between Lightning and like what information you need and like paying for it, right? Like you can pay for a socket for like, 30 seconds or a minute. And then if you stop paying, that socket gets cut off. Things like that. So like we're always like looking at more use cases, and then developers can also build that as well on top of us. We really just want to try to like abstract all like the data and service level stuff, so that way developers just build their own applications.
Yeah, I'm really excited what you guys are building. Yeah, I'm particularly intrigued by the concept of buying sockets from multiple parties and sort of stringing them together, if possible, in like a Tor-like arrangement. So you're paying for the bandwidth, but you have some privacy assurances that Tor would give you, but it's fast. Yeah, I'm really, really excited to see what people cook up with your platform. I was stoked to see Zach put together that Red Phone implementation over the Lightning nodes. I think it would be really funny if you could, potentially call up one of your counterparties and complain to them about your channels, your routing, or something. But then again, you'd need that connectivity. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be countless use cases, that could be built upon this thing that we haven't even thought of yet. So there's a lot to be excited about.
All right, I think I have the final question of the episode here for everybody. Where do you see this technology going? Is our full stack of content creation only going to get sweeter and better? What do you guys think?
Come on, somebody make a prediction. I think we're seeing the pieces come together for like a golden age of distributed, decentralized content creation here. I think this eliminating of middlemen has been something that we've talked about for a long time, and I can really see it happening now. Right? I think we do have the pieces. I think people are pushing in that direction, and I'm really excited to see it.
All right. Well, if no one has anything else, we're going to go ahead and close out this Twitter space. I want to go ahead and thank Stephan, Rusty, Evan, Justifer, Sahib, Anthony, Vivek, and everyone else that asked any questions. I want to thank all the audience members, everyone on the live stream, and everything else. But for now, I'll see you on the Lightning Network.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, guys. Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.